Paul makes it so clear. He says, be anxious for nothing, but in everything, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, let your requests be known to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. That is from Philippians chapter 4, 6 through 7. And that is really hard to do. If you've ever felt anxious, you know that it's just not something you can like turn off like a light switch. And so today we're going to be wrestling with this question, like, what does it look like to manage our anxiety? And what does it look like to lean into this image of, this peace and calm that transcends all understanding? So whether you battle acute anxiety every day, or maybe you live with a perpetual state of background anxiety, we hope that this conversation might help all of us just experience more calm and peace in our lives. Welcome to The Work Within, where we have conversations about mental health and faith to help you live with greater connection and wholeness in your everyday life. The Work Within is a podcast of the Watershed Initiative, supporting the mental health needs of the local church. Thanks for listening. So I'm your host, John Lynn, and today I am joined by my friends and licensed professional counselors, Jerla Prevalon and Paul McMullen. Hey, how are y'all doing today, y'all?
Doing good.
Hey, John. Hey, Jerla. It's good to be with you guys.
It's been a minute, and it's really good to see you. And I'm excited about our conversation today. I've been anxious about our conversation. See what I did there?
Yes.
Like a pro.
Well played.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about something really important that I think affects a lot of people. But before we do that, just two quick invitations. If this show has helped you at all, we would love it if you could leave us a rating or review. That just helps the show get in front of more people. And also, if you're looking for a clinically trained Christian therapist, we'd love to be a resource for you. All right. So, Jerla, Paul, what is making you anxious these days?
You first.
Oh, wow. I feel like the bulk of my anxiety is really work related. I often feel like I'm afraid and anxious that it's all going to fall apart. It's funny because whenever I talk to Lee, that's my confession to him. I'm like, Lee, at any given moment, I feel like it's just gonna all fall apart and combust. Do you feel that? And so
Dang, that sounds weighty. That sounds really weighty.
I go, you asked about anxiety. That's the core of my anxiety. It's all going to fall apart at any given moment.
Yeah. I don't know if that's different professions have different anxieties, but it does. In the private practice counseling world, I can relate to that, Jerla. It's like, is this going to work out next week, next month? I don't know. And there's an inconsistency built in. So, wow, I feel that. I jotted down some notes, and finances were part of that, and that was definitely involved in work. We are changing up our health care because my wife's job is changing, and that is full of anxiety. And then just relationally, like I think I have that underlying anxiety, some with family related stuff, but also with friendships. Am I maintaining friendships? Do I have enough friendships for this time in my life? Why don't I have more friendship? Those questions run in the back of my mind. So I've got some anxiety about relationships too.
Yeah. There's like a full breadth. I mean, there's a wide breadth of things that can make us anxious. And we haven't even talked about politics and things happening in the world, right? This is just at a smaller sphere. I was talking with my kids this morning on the way dropping off to camp. And I realized like every morning I wake up anxious about my dog, like whether he's going to poo and pee in his crate and whether I'm going to have to clean up a giant mess. And so I've been realizing I wake up every morning and that's one of my first thoughts, like, oh crud, I wonder if Nori pooed and peed in his crate and how messy it is. And it was funny just talking with them and realizing that like that single moment or decision, like whatever happens there could sort of direct my day for the rest of the day. Was I going to have a good day or a bad day? I also realized that, yeah, I carry a lot of anxiety about my parents, who are, they're getting advanced in
Mhm.
age. And,
Yeah.
those of us who have aging parents, worrying about their health and all these questions about like, what's that going to look like? Those questions definitely sit in the back of my mind a lot. So yeah, lots of things to be
Yeah.
anxious
Yeah.
about. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Were you going to say something, Jilla, about that?
No, I was just
Yeah.
agreeing,
Yeah.
resonating with what you
Yeah.
shared.
That's
We
right.
shared from like the depth of everything falling apart to like
Yeah.
waking up to a giant pool from
Dude,
up the
yeah.
top. We
That's
ran the whole
right.
spectrum of
That's
the things
right.
that make us anxious. Yeah.
Yeah. And that brings up this point that anxiety is, in a way, it's all around us, is very common and familiar. And in some ways, I had to even pause and think about, like, in a way, I could take it for granted because I've always lived with a lot of anxiety. And so in some ways, I just feel like it's a normal part of my life. And it is normal. But I don't want to, in a way, I think I can minimize the impact of anxiety in our lives. And so can we talk about that a bit? Like, what is the impact of anxiety? Is it that serious? Like, does it make that big of a deal? So what are your thoughts about that?
Um,
Your turn, Paul. Go
Yeah.
ahead. Go for it.
yes, yes.
Yes.
It's a great question because I do think there's a cultural level of anxiety. We've talked about it on a few different episodes, but I really think, there's some books out, The Anxious Generation, some other ones that just point to what's happening in our culture. But on a personal level, I do think uh, uh, having a little bit or a lot of anxiety, one of the things it does, it speeds us up. And I think the more sped up I am, the less present I am with the people
Yeah.
around me. And that could be with God as well. I can go through a whole day worrying about a whole lot of things, never once, remembering God with me, God present
Right.
inside me. So missing people because the anxiety has got us stirred up. And then feeling the unconscious need. This is what I wrote. I'm just reading. Feeling the unconscious need to regulate, like not being aware that I need to regulate, but it's there, and using. I heard a great phrase called pseudo-regulators from which was kind of funny. I was talking with a client. We were joking about the song "Regulators" from the '90s. Y'all remember that one, the rap song? So we're talking about,
I don't know
all
that
right,
one.
so completely missed on that one. But pseudo regulators that people use. So if we think about how do we regulate our anxiety, how do we move to a place where we feel better, right? And we're going to talk about some of those. A
Huh.
pseudo regulator is something that we use that might chemically change something inside me that I feel better, but the underlying
Mm,
issues are not different. So if I use nicotine to calm down, or if I use alcohol to calm down, that's a pseudo regulator. I'm
right.
using it to lower the activation in my system. But a lot of us, what I'm pointing out is a lot of times we feel this need and we do these things reactively without even thinking about why we're doing it. We grab our phone as soon as we
Yeah.
feel uncomfortable or as soon as we get a break. Why am I looking at my phone again? Why am I playing that game again? Why am I scrolling again? It's because I'm regulating my anxiety. I'm not even aware
Yeah.
that I'm doing it. And so dependence on these pseudo false regulators is one thing that I've seen in me and in a lot of other people that I talk to.
Yeah, yeah. No, I appreciate you sharing that and putting a name to it because we all do it. I think on the one hand, um, some measure of anxiety causes us to perform Better, it causes us to be more on top of our game. It causes us to dot our I's and cross our T's, study a little bit more efficiently, be better writers. Some form of anxiety heightens our awareness of what we need to do differently, because we can't fully get rid of all the anxieties. It's just part of living in a world where things just keep happening, right? And so we will have to engage and manage some form of anxiety, and some of it does help, but the long-term impact of anxiety that is unmanaged and unchecked can have not just emotional and mental impact, but also physical impact, such as, IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. A lot of people have some measure of that because there's some measure of anxiety, heart palpitation, or even panic attacks. Those types of things are impacts of anxiety. Yeah. And also the impact of not being present and the impact of, not being your full self. It's almost like you're always hyper aware, hyper conscious, hyper vigilant of everything in your world because of anxiety, which, like Paul said, it causes you to not be present with people because you're always planning. You're always planning for your exit strategy or your escape strategy from this anxiety, or how would you handle this if the worst were to happen? So you're always processing in your head, what would you do if the worst were to happen, And so it does take life from you. It does create you to lose hours, lose days, lose moments, lose joy, lose fun with friends and people that you love. And so there's great impact when it's unmanaged, unchecked, and unaware, right?
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Thanks for highlighting some of those things. I'm reflecting on some of the ways I respond to anxiety, and it brings up this question of how anxiety impacts relationships, how it impacts systems. So I think probably a lot of people think of anxiety in terms of, how it affects my own sense of peace and tranquility. And certainly it does that in big ways in our physical health.
Yeah.
And it also has a tremendous impact on the people that we're connected to. And the anxiety of others definitely affects us. So I'm thinking about how I've heard some leaders and system theorists talk about how when there's a lot of anxiety in system, people may tend to overfunction or underfunction. And I see both of those in me. Like when I feel really anxious, I may try to then control like everything. I become a control freak.
Right.
And if you're a leader, if you're serving with me on a team or you're in my family, that could be, you'd be like, oh boy, here's dad just micromanaging everything. And that feels really awful. Sometimes I'll just totally underfunction and I'm just not even there. I'm there, but not engaged, and I'm not doing what I can do. And then other people have to pick up the pieces or, compensate for me. And so can we speak about that? Like, how do you see anxiety affecting systems, whether that's family systems or churches, organizations? Are there any notable impacts there that you want to point out?
Well, you definitely not want to work under an anxious leader.
Why not?
An anxious leader makes life unbearable because everyone's on edge.
Yeah.
Everyone's on edge, and it's never enough, right? You walk around with the feeling of never being enough for this anxious leader because they're trying to manage their anxiety with control. And there's nothing wrong with having systems, with having programs, with having ways of doing things and following policies and rules. That's something completely different from the anxious leader that's micromanaging,
Yeah.
that things must be done in the
Yeah.
way that they see it. There's no freedom, there's no flexibility to be innovative, to be, imaginative or
Yeah. It
anything like
squashes
that.
creativity, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
does. It does squash creativity. It takes from your team, and you find your team being carbon copy of the leader,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that doesn't make
Mm.
for a great diverse team, because
Right.
part of growing in a team is to for everyone to bring their ingenuity and their best selves. And if all I'm producing is what my leader wants me to produce, it doesn't make for, not just a fun place, but a place that is innovative, cutting edge, and diverse, right?
Hmm.
And then there's the opposite side that you talk about as well, is the leader that is so anxious, and it paralyzes them. So what you were talking about is the paralyzing effect of anxiety, where you feel like you've lost complete control
Yeah.
and you're mute and you can't do anything about it, and everyone's looking for you to lead and they can't find you because you're in a
Mm.
corner somewhere curled up
Oh,
in a fetal position and you
yeah.
can't lead, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's two complete different leader
Yeah.
that, and both of them have the same issue. It's unmanaged anxiety. And I've seen both. I've seen both.
And I think as you're saying that, what we're not saying is like a family system or a workplace culture or a church where there's not expectation or not boundaries or not challenges. Like it can be
Right.
good, like you were saying earlier, if I'm getting ready for a podcast or if I'm getting ready for to I don't know, to play in a sport, I'm gonna perform even a little bit better because my senses are heightened. I've got some adrenaline going, that kind of thing. Um, and we want to be able to have hard conversations in a culture. So it's not like the opposite is permissive. Everybody's happy and it's friendly and we never step on any
Hmm.
toes. But it's more that confident, um, we're calm in the fact that we trust one another. We can have the hard conversations. We can wrestle with things because there is a degree of safety. We can we're we're not, I think more anxiety in a system typically means more people are really hiding. Again,
Yeah.
rather than being creative, free flowing, there's more hiding. And so if you're in the protected part of your brain, that's not the part that can feel as creative and as connected to other people. And so anxiety kind of puts us in a part of our brain where we're shutting off that creative part. And so, but again, that I just think that's different than the ultra permissive anything goes sort of family or culture. And so that's not, I don't think, what we're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. So, like, I think a lot of us want to manage our anxiety well. Like we read a verse or hear a verse like Philippians 4, don't be anxious about anything, but pray and be thankful and this peace will guard. But in reality, it's like, man, that feels so hard to do. Um, and so what are some of the things that we try to do that you guys have seen is actually uh, not helpful in managing anxiety?
Ignore it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just keep
Yeah.
going. It'll fix itself.
Mm.
Um,
Well,
yeah.
say more about that. Yeah, say more about that. I mean, do you feel, I mean, I guess, is it your sense that most people, that's generally how we respond to anxiety? Just, yeah, it's minimize it, just endure it, work through it, ignore it. But yeah, what's the repercussions of that?
I mean, I do think that we minimize it. I think that we just learn to live with it. Like you mentioned that at first, and I think it becomes so normal that we don't realize the impact on ourselves. Um, And so, yeah, the impact is a fast-paced, hurried-up life. And I can remember
Yeah.
Yarla talking about that in a different episode, um,
Yeah.
versus a life that feels more peaceful and connected and at rest. I think that's the biggest impact is we get used to the hurried running where I'm running from something, not even sure exactly what I'm running from, not sure what would happen if it caught me, but I'm running and
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
keeps us on our toes rather than at peace.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like the deadline that's coming and I feel anxious about it. So let me just work harder to get that
Right.
thing
Yeah.
done. And I think that by finishing that thing, it'll reduce all the anxiety. Which,
Yeah.
I mean, there may be an element that once you get that project done, like you feel some anxiety relief, but there may be an underlying thing that if you're not an underlying drive, right? This, whatever is that belief or narrative that makes you think that it has to be a certain way, or your identity or your security is contingent upon achieving that thing. Well, that's a deeper underlying, right? Narrative that needs to be processed. But sometimes the way we deal with our anxiety is actually by just trying to work harder, work faster, and that actually only contributes to the anxiety, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think one thing I will add to this conversation about anxiety is that there are some real things that are happening that should or that it makes sense for us to be anxious about, right? And there are some communities that live in states of anxiety. And I'm thinking of immigrant communities, refugee communities, underserved, under-resourced communities. There are some real things that are happening in their lives that make life hard and that makes life more anxious producing,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
these communities that are under resourced, they're constantly trying to figure out how they're going to feed their family, insurance, health insurance, or, if they're safe, their safety, their children's safety, and things like that. So those are real measures that produce anxiety. And I think the question about what makes it worse, and Paul mentioned ignoring it, it does make it worse, or it doesn't make it any better, right? Many of these communities, from what we can tell, is that there aren't real measures to go into like a one-on-one therapy or even have a small groups to talk about anxiety, so the resources are even less available to some of those communities to be able to deal with the anxiety, and which again makes the case for perpetuating it and make it even worse in their lives. And so ignoring it and working harder towards it doesn't remove it. If anything, it makes those impacts that we talked about earlier even more real for those communities, which is why, shameless plug, the reason we're doing this podcast and the reason for the organization is to make some of these resources available for those who
Yeah.
don't have the resources to deal with anxiety and the like. So yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
And it with that, Jirla, just having somebody either read a verse about what you should be doing or just say, just stop it, or
Right, right.
God's got you, which is true, but it's ignoring I think it's a verse in James that it's like, yeah, it's great to be nice to somebody and say, hey, be blessed by God and be well fed. And then it's another thing to like help the person, receive those
Right.
things. And so don't just use your words like, you want to, it demands action to follow through. And I think the same with anxiety. It's one thing to talk about, you know, faith versus anxiety, and it's another thing to say like, all right, these are this is the context that's creating anxiety, whether it's in a cultural or a family or in a community, and saying, all right, we want to equip you and we want you to practice these things, that there is hope for it. But there's also reasons, there's good reasons why people feel anxious. There's traumatic events that happen in a person's life
Absolutely.
that create anxiety and create a watchfulness, because especially when the people that should be taking care of you in whatever context are the ones that harm you, it creates that distrust of relationships. Because especially when you're younger, if you don't have the
Yeah,
power to take care of yourself, of course you're going to feel anxious in relationships. Or the
absolutely.
person that gives themselves to somebody and loves them, but then is betrayed, right? Or multiple times, and they're finding it hard to open themselves up to a new relationship. Well, of course you are. Of course your system is
Right.
on high alert. And that's why we need to find healing. We need, there's need for grief, there's need for assurance and repair and healing. But the anxiety is very understandable in all of those contexts. And I don't think easy answers or shame
Yeah.
is the right approach.
Absolutely.
Mm, yeah. Thanks for naming that, and always both of y'all for acknowledging the ways that anxiety can affect different individuals and communities in varied ways, and also making the point that we never want to, uh, shame or bring that voice of judgment when we're talking about these things, but to acknowledge that these are a fact of our lives, and to, in a very constructive and compassionate way, ask what does it look like to perhaps choose a different way or engage in a different way or find healthier tools. Can y'all speak to then what what might be what might be some of the shifts that people can make to manage anxiety better? Because what I hear us talking about is we're not trying to eliminate it. It's just a fact of life, and in fact, some anxiety is actually helpful and productive. It's when it takes over or robs us of being able to be present, or causes us to be over controlling or not show up at all. So, yeah, what are some of those shifts that help us to manage anxiety in a healthier way?
Yeah, we've alluded to some of the ways to start learning to manage and not just eliminate, but manage anxiety. One of the main first steps is to become aware of the reason I do XYZ is because I'm anxious. The reason I'm controlling is because I'm trying to manage my anxiety. The reason I, yell is because I'm trying to manage my anxiety. And I would not like to be that way. I would love to learn to manage my anxiety better. I think there's something about being aware, and there's something about naming, something about seeing the actions that you are doing. And of course, if you're around yes people and you're around people that can't tell you that, hey, do you know you do XYZ when, XYZ happen? If you don't have those people around you, I am so sorry, because you do need those people around you to say,
Yeah.
hey, there's something going on. Would you like to talk? Would you like to sit? Just to help you create some awareness, because sometimes we can't illuminate our own faults. We can't be the light to our own issues. Sometimes we need the people, the friends, the family, the colleagues, the employees, which is why it's important to create space for your employees to give feedback, and for you to be able to receive it. That, there's something that happens in our meetings when we're under pressure, under deadline, and this is what it looks like.
Hmm.
So awareness is so key. Being able to agree with what people are seeing about you is key, or even have a conversation about it is key, and then move into different actions, move into spaces where you are able to manage your anxiety. Every morning I wake up with anxiety of everything is going to fall apart. Every morning I wake up, almost every morning I wake up. I almost never wake up with like, oh Lord, you are so blah, blah, blah. I almost always wake up with anxiety that the world is going to fall apart and things are just not going to be all right. And what do I do every morning? I get up, put on my tennis shoes, and go outside and walk for like 3, 4 miles, lift weights. And then I come back home and I'm like, oh, the world is okay again. It's not going to fall apart. I think I'm going to be all right today. And then all of a sudden I have ideas of how to make the world a better place. I have ideas of how to co-labor with God to make things a little bit better. I'm talking to God nice again. My people nice again. Every morning.
God's like, don't pray right now, Drilla. Go run first.
Exactly.
And then you come back to me.
That's the funny thing, because people think of quiet time first. I cannot have quiet time first because my head is on fire and I think the world is falling apart, and my quiet time is loud time. And so I need something to help me create that quietness so that I can talk to God and the people better again. So for me, it's always something physical that gets me back into my right mind.
That is so awesome, Drilla, because in my knowing you, I would never have pinned you as someone who's anxious. Like you seem to me very cool as a cucumber and all that. But I guess, so thank you for acknowledging that you also wrestle with anxiety. And you found ways to manage it, right? Yeah.
I was going to say, she always works out before she talks to you, John.
Exactly. I need
why
to
is she
work
always
out.
sweaty?
Exactly. That's why before 11 o'clock, I cannot have any meetings, because I'm working myself out. And I'm a child of immigrants. Okay. And so I have anxiety, I've talked about generational trauma and I'm 1.5 generation immigrant. So I have anxiety inside of me that's been there since I was born in Haiti, right? And so in my adulthood, I've learned that. I've learned that some of my anxiety is coming from somewhere, and that living under constant fear as an immigrant in this country, and living in constant need in this country, and shame and all that brings forth a lot of anxiety. And in this season in my adult life, I feel like I'm learning to manage it better. I'm learning to not react based on what my anxiety is telling me that it's all going to fall apart, because it can be paralyzing. That's the other thing that I do, is that when I feel like it's going to fall apart, then why bother? But I have work to do. God has given me work to do.
Yes.
So why bother? Because God has called me to do this thing, and I need courage, and I need clarity, and I need quietness to be able to get that work done. So I've had to learn, what's going on inside of me. And I show up in confidence because I've walked 4 miles already, and now I'm good.
That's great.
I love that. I was gonna say too, don't neglect the body and what the body needs. So I love, you've already covered that. There's something about being outside, breathing, walking on the grass, working in the garden, stretching, moving, breathing, playing a sport, all of those things where you're just actively engaging, and it really does do something. It releases some of that energy. So it's like, it feels like that feels different than like a mindfulness approach, but it's not, like it's still the body oriented stuff is super effective and important. Um, I wanted to go back to Philippians 4 though, because I think we got this verse about don't be anxious. And it's like the high pressure verse. Oh gosh, oh gosh. But
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
theological training in me, John, along with I know your own, like I got to go back to the context. And so when I'm looking through that chapter in Philippians 4, before that verse, it talks about rejoicing, rejoice always. And I think about what is it like just to praise God no matter what else is going on. And I'm not necessarily the the living example of this one, but I know people that they they praise like they have a worshipful heart regardless of what else is going on, and that does something to them when they worship, when they pray, and it's an active sort of thing, and um, that does something to their heart regarding their anxiety.
Yeah.
And then the next verse talks about um, it says the Lord is near in one part. I really should go back and read the whole thing, but I'm not going to. But it talks about um, the Lord is close by, and so what if like in your anxiety you do invite the Lord into that space? What is it like to
Mm.
say maybe after 4 miles of walking, Lord, this is the stuff I wake up with. Come and be present. Where are you in this mess? Um, and so that's really powerful. And then after the anxious verse, then you get the verse about whatever is good and true and noble, think on those things. And that's
Yeah.
like your mental focus first. Of like, hey, you could be oriented to all the things that could go wrong, but to what degree do you have the ability to change your orientation to say, this is where I'm going to put my mind on these things? And we've talked about in other episodes, it's not always as easy as just Paul, put your mind on that. Sometimes I really need help. I need Jirla and John to say, hey, we're with you in the anxiety, but
Yeah.
we also want you to know that is not all that's true about your situation. Your world is not going to completely combust and fall apart. Like it's going to be okay. We're going to be with you no matter what. And something in that wrestling and in that sharing helps to orient me towards what is good and true. And so I just to say, Philippians 4, it's got the pressure verse about don't be anxious, but then it's also got a lot more to it. And I think if we're practicing all those things together, I think it makes that don't be anxious verse in the context. I think it helps
Yeah.
because there's relational components, there's
Yeah.
thankfulness,
Yeah.
praise, there's presence, remembering the Lord's presence. So like maybe go back, and read through that section and just think like, what if I'm experiencing all these things and how does that help me not live in anxiety as much?
Mm. That's so good.
That's good.
Paul, have you preached a sermon on this before? I'm sure you have. That's really rich. And I'm sitting with your comment about the Lord is near and that relational piece because I think often, at least for myself, and I think a lot of Christians, it's the same way. It's like we have these struggles, whether it's with anxiety or something else, and often we feel like I have to figure it out on my own first, and then I can show up to God rather than inviting God right there in the moment into the messiness or into the thing that we feel ashamed about or that we actually feel like is driving us away from God, to actually invite God into that. And that's like I feel like the step of really learning how to walk this life in all its messiness with God, the with God life. And so I'm even thinking about what a hopeful message that is for people where they find themselves, like you were mentioning, Paul, in a season where like my human relationships and friendships are not what I want them to be. And I don't have that support at this point.
Yeah.
That still there is this gracious reality that the divine presence, right? God's presence can be with us in the midst of the struggle, in the midst of the strife that we feel.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm thinking about, as you guys are talking too, the reality as I look at my own life about how, yeah, we're not going to eliminate all anxiety. And like Jerla, what you're saying, like every morning you still wake up anxious, but now you have a way to manage that. And so maybe it's like maybe the parallels into relationships where it's like, yeah, you're going to say things that hurt someone, but the key is to learn how to repair that relationship, right? And
Right.
to learn how to do that repair earlier and more often in a relationship. And that's the growth, not having any conflict.
Right.
And so maybe the same is true with anxiety. It's like it's always going to be there, but if each of us can grow in our capacity to recalibrate more quickly, earlier, and more often, then that's the measure of progress, right? Or increasing maturity as people and human beings.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think that's something I've been trying to learn. Just, man, I feel so stressed. I feel overwhelmed. Okay, how do I recenter? How do I recalibrate?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's important for everyone to identify what works for them and have a toolkit
Yes.
that you can go into it and grab the thing that you need, whether it be in the moment, have some positive affirming verses, have the calling a friend, going out for a walk, having those two kids that consistently work every time to help manage your anxiety.
Mm, mm. Well, I think we're nearing the end of our conversation. As we wrap up, is there anything else y'all would like to highlight or to say to those who are tuning in today?
I just I want to reaffirm that if anxiety is a big part of your life, uh, we understand that. I think we're not hiding the fact that we've learned a lot about mental health and we practice and try to equip other people and it's there, it's still there. And so it's not about um, again, not about feeling shame over finding yourself in that place. Like you should be in a better place. But it is saying, how do we, just like you said, John, how do we grow to where we can experience that and not just live in that reactionary world where I'm just getting washed back and forth by the next thing to make me anxious. That's not abundant life either. And I don't think
No.
any of us
Yeah.
want to feel that way. And so um again, recognizing that your anxiety in some way is trying to protect you, and then just inviting these other practices and voices into your life so that you can create more space to be able to um, respond differently to them. I think is that slower approach, slow, kind approach that we talk about a lot on this
Yeah. Yeah.
podcast. And just to know, like, God loves you and uh, loves you where you are and wants to walk with you and make it feel lighter. Like that's a promise of Jesus where he says, "You walk with me, it's gonna feel lighter." And like I can't make that happen for you, and Jirla can't, John can't, but that's a promise. So I think we can stand on it, but we got to pursue it, open ourselves up to that, and say like, all right, if I'm not experiencing that. How do I find that? I need that.
Yeah, I don't think I can add anything to close. I think that's a beautiful way for us to close this session because everything Paul has shared is just on the money, as they say. So you're not alone.
Yeah.
If you're listening, watching this, you are not alone dealing with anxiety on your own. We understand, and it's understandable because of the things that you have been carrying that you would have anxiety, but you're not alone to deal with it on your own, and you're not doomed to anxiety.
Hmm.
It doesn't have to take over to the point where it's debilitating and it takes life from you. You can have abundant life even when there's anxiety.
That's great. So I guess let me just say, be anxious for nothing. But when you are anxious, and you will be compassionate and kind to yourself. Let's try to be more aware. And over time, we could develop a toolkit that helps us to manage our anxiety a little bit better. And that one little incremental degree of change can have a big impact over time if we stay at it. So Paul, Jirla, thank you so much for sharing today. Thank you for tuning in. I do want to mention that we've created new episode pages for each episode that actually have articles and other resources. So look for that in the show notes. In conclusion, may God bless you and strengthen you as you do the work. Thanks for tuning in today. Thanks for tuning in to The Work Within. We hope this show blessed you in some way. Please subscribe and leave us a review. Your support means a lot to us. Finally, if you're looking for a therapist, we'd love to help. Visit us at www.watershedinitiative.com to get started. For a limited time, new clients can receive 10% off their first 5 sessions of therapy by mentioning The Work Within. Join us again next time.